we do the same thing. Everybody starts talking and you hear a beat. It's like, what was that?
Okay, we're on.
We're on. Oh, good. Okay, so we'll call this meeting of the Ad Hoc Sewer Feasibility Implementation Committee in order. It's good to see everybody here this morning. You know, we have a draft recommendation that we're going to discuss, and got a few little logistical things we're going to talk about with that to make sure we're all on the same page. And what we're really going to get out of today is we're going to find out who's in support of the recommendation and how much, so we can be ready to move forward with what's next. So just keep that in mind before we leave today. Everybody's going to have an opportunity to state where they are. So that's where we are starting out. We're going to, as usual, you don't want to talk this morning. You just want to listen. Do what?
We have set it up.
He got here early.
He got here early, so he got it out for us. Well, you'll have another opportunity at the end of the meeting if you would like to speak. So no public comment this morning at this time, but we do have our minutes, and hope everybody's had a chance to look through those. And so once I get eye contact from everybody, we'll see about approving the minutes.
So moved.
You got somebody moved? Do we need to make any? Is there any comments and need to make any edits? All right, so we got a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes, say yes.
Yes.
All right. So anybody opposed? All right. So we got the minutes approved. Thank you for having the minutes so well prepared. All right. So now we're going to move on to the meat of the meeting. We got, as I said, you've all have a copy, been sent a copy of the draft recommendations. You have, I think, a hard copy in front of you. At this time, I just want to hear any discussion, any comments as we on the draft recommendation. I do know we have some discussion. We're going to talk about some of the implementation and what that might look like. But so I've got it out there. Let's hear what you have to say. What do you think? Silence.
I think it looks great.
Joel, I'll start.
Oh goodness. Yeah, go ahead, River.
I think I got the right document up here. But we talked, when this thing first came out, I sent a comment to Joel and I said, this sounds strongly like we're just going to add another member. And some of the more, Mayor quoting, revolutionary things we talk about are kind of buried down in there, like the consolidation of the member systems.
So, Rivers, let's make sure you do have the latest before you, because
I got to tell you, I've got a lot of documents.
I bet you do.
You did. Chris emailed
Yeah, I emailed it to you a few days ago, but
Monday.
Catherine,
Is this draft reconstruction?
it's stated up at the top, regional sewer feasibility study. Then underneath it, it says in red, draft reconstitution recommendations for discussion.
I think that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So if I look at this, the third bullet is the collection systems to be consolidated into one system.
Yep.
Yes.
That to me is almost inconsistent with the system having members. It's a radical unification proposal that I think when we discuss it, people have said that's the way this needs to work.
Mm.
I'm a little bit worried that there's an interim step of just adding the county as a member and you have the same issues.
Okay.
Well, I don't think it's listed sequentially.
That's right.
It's all these things have to happen.
Correct. And that is correct. What Catherine just said is correct. It is not it's not an iterative process.
If you do some of the things we've discussed doing, there's no such thing as members, as constituent body members.
Yeah, it is.
Like in our discussion, we all most of us all, it's better not to have governmental entity members.
So
I see
it
what you're
is,
saying.
it is the board, the authority board makeup, whatever you call those. So it is not member cities, but everything else then becomes how you fill this board. If all the systems are consolidated into one, then you have a governing body of the authority, and how those members are appointed, elected, whatever.
The phrasing of that first bullet
Yes.
point, though, I can see how that should be adjusted. I'll comment on that.
And maybe we could do it with a clarification of what, in this context, what a member means.
Right.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Member means
Representation. Correct. Yeah.
So we just changed the first one
But I
to
will say,
say,
acting under the statute, they still are quote unquote member, because those are the only entities that can create or reconstitute the system.
Yeah. So I think it's clarification on what member means.
Yeah, we can do that.
If I'm hearing you correct, Lawrence, is that's what it's
So
that's what it's called under the
members have to
statute.
be the political subdivisions.
Right.
The board of commissioners is I think the open question about how they're appointed and who they happen to be.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that's a great distinction. I didn't know you could have a distinction on that.
Yeah, we're still planning to use the Joint Authority Act, and in order to be a joint authority, you have to be made up of the cooperative members of the local government. The question then becomes, after consolidation, the members are still the constituent cities and the counties, and then the board of directors would be whoever's appointed to govern that body.
Okay. So maybe what we do on that, Lawrence, is just add some clarification language at the start of this, if we get to this point, that this is the way the committee wants to go, that clarifies what you just said for everybody, based on the statute.
Makes sense. And I do think your point is a very good one. And even if they're not sequential, that's probably the biggest change, and it's something that probably needs to be put out there, probably in bold.
Well, I'm sure we'll have some clarification if we talk about district boundaries and how that looks, that we kind of wrap that all together, wouldn't you think?
Agreed.
Into a.
so for the third bullet, striking the word member, current collection system shall be consolidated. We take that out completely. Because there's no other collection systems. Just take the word member out. I see what your point.
I think that's fair.
Hey, can I ask y'all about, that's a good, while we're on that one, the equitable rate structure. I didn't know if that anticipated like we were gonna have 3 or 4 different rate structures. I thought
No, it'd be
a
one.
unified single rate structure.
That is correct.
Okay.
And maybe we clarify that with a unified equitable rate structure, so they understand that it's not multiple.
Just a question. If folks have the information for, how different are the rate structures at the retail level among the members as they exist today?
There's variation
Very, very good. Yes.
They're like quantum jump?
Yeah.
from none to
Yeah.
some.
Yeah. I think actually Westminster probably, I think, has the highest rate.
Is it based off of collection cost, or is it is it down here for treatment? I mean, I don't know how you set
Both.
up.
There's a treatment and a volume. There's a treatment component, a wholesale rate basically, and then there is the rate that they charge for collections.
And what they're paying for treatment, are they paying just the O&M cost, or is there a capital portion that they have that increases their rate significantly? I'm just thinking the way we're set up, the members get to elect how much capacity they own, and if you happen to say you need 5 times the capacity that you normally use, your actual rate is really high, but that's because you're sitting on unused capital assets. I'm just trying to understand the rate structure in place so that that'll be something to overcome if they're wildly disparate and there's no way to.
I would, go ahead, Chris.
And I'm gonna say, and take this with a grain of salt, because this is just what I pulled off of the websites back in January, and this is for December for each of the cities while adding in our rate. So what I have, and this is for assuming a 5,000 gallon per month residential inside city rate. Seneca's is about $63, while Hollis is about $49, and Westminster's is about $66. Again, that just kind of shows you what we're looking at. That does factor in to that, what our costs would be as well.
So when we talked about this, so the authority has done a rate study right now that I think would then have to, if this consolidation happens, we know that there are a number of steps that would go into valuation of collection system assets, also condition assessment of those assets to determine what that looks like in the future. That would then go into kind of updating this rate evaluation study that was done for the authority to determine what that rate looks like if it as a consolidated entity. And I do think I know we just said that there would be a unified equitable rate structure. There may need to be some considerations with regard to that valuation piece and that asset piece with regard to what that looks like, at least initially, for investment in the different systems.
Yeah.
So just from my perspective, the rates need to be what the rates are. So you really can't adjust those, but you can adjust the value of the system when you start talking about the consolidation. That's because some people have invested more in their systems than others.
Yeah, but I could see having a collection surcharge to equalization to get everybody to the same standard.
Right.
For a period of time. I was more looking at, are the rates different? Chris, are your rates different to each of the members?
No, sir.
Okay.
They're not.
So in my thought, that's where this committee, I think we need to just state our recommendation that we're recommending a unified and equitable rate structure, and how that plays out is beyond the work of this committee. But that's
Yeah, that goes into the next steps.
yeah.
I would agree with that because the debt is also a major issue.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Well, if that doesn't get addressed, then the problem still exists, right? I mean, you've got to figure those things out in order to move forward.
Right.
Because some systems are obviously under resourced, right? And so.
and the thought, I guess the thought process behind the consolidation is to try to get to a more level playing field so that all the systems are being addressed equally and in a unified manner.
Is the county joining essentially a part of the consolidation? This financial part, like, it made me think, like, is the county just putting its assets in, or is it selling its assets?
That's to be determined.
It's just like these other ones, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So essentially, we need to buy all the city systems and the county systems. And some of those numbers may be zero.
You need to acquire.
Some of them may be.
Yeah,
Acquire. Yeah.
Acquire is a better word.
Yeah. Yeah, that is correct. You are correct.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's where the rubber hits the road, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge for the committee is, though, we could talk about all the iterations of that all day, but whatever we come up with, it's going to really depend on the members and their position and negotiating one by one. So I don't think that's the role the committee gets to play.
And I will say, as Catherine and I kind of talked through this, while I don't want to make light of how difficult the next steps are going to be with consolidation in there, but it does do away with a lot of other things that were flies in the ointment, so to speak, that we were going to have to deal with if this did not happen.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a trade-off on we're gaining some ground in some areas, but we still have some hard work to do in other areas to get there.
It seems that if there's going to be a equalization payments or whatever, surcharges, to get everybody to the same level, that's really what's gonna happen. Somebody's gonna have to likely step up, to get their system equal. Need to make sure that we, back to one of the recommendations, have a timeline. I think there needs to be some expectation of how long you're going to allow equalization to occur over, or what's a meaningful time period. I mean, if you don't, I don't know if you ever get to an equalized or a standard rate if you don't set a goal.
Sure. And I think that can be, I don't know that we have enough information to set that timeline that you all have that information to set that timeline as this committee, but that can be part of our recommendation that go into the pieces with regard to the valuation of the assets, et cetera. Yeah.
But I'm just saying.
And maybe put a timeline on the establishment of the timeline. Maybe put a timeline.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you
Because
don't,
you're gonna need
then
to
it's
know the
like
money
you
component
could have
up front.
someone, you'll just have unequal rates for the next 50 years. And
Right.
because you chose a 50-year period.
Right, but you can say within 6 months, establish a timeline, because it would take you 6 months probably to figure out the financial component. I'm assuming you back into a timeline based on how much
Yeah.
No,
it
I'm fine with,
costs.
I was just
It makes total sense there.
noting that, things that are left unsaid often get.
Undone.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. That's been brought up, I think, by several people. And it could be as part of our recommendation. We can draw a line in the sand as a committee and say, within 24 months or 36 months, this should be fully implemented. And without going into all the steps, you need to do this by then. That's not, I don't think, for this committee to figure out. But I do think it is, without a schedule of implementation, I don't think we've completed our work. I think that should be a recommendation. This needs to happen by a certain
Yes.
time in the future. Now, it's non-binding, but it is a recommendation. Because things get hard.
Intervening stuff that you've got to figure out how you do that valuation and how you make the asset review. And I think that needs to have a hard deadline of like no later than a year. It's going to take a long time, but it could potentially drag out for forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's, to that point, Lawrence, I think it's important that happen. As you said before, the longer it drags on, the more either debt will be added to the various systems. Right now, the authority has no debt, which is great, and we need to take advantage of that. And the quicker we get that done, we've already got some debt entanglements to deal with. We don't want more.
Well, I would just suggest that, rather than trying to come up with a hard number, some kind of guidance that would suggest that equalization payments should not extend beyond the life of the notes that are already out there.
Okay.
You should try to get it up before,
Yeah, in my mind, it may not, you're coming from the water world, and that's, I'm thinking on the sea, it may not be the equal, there may be other ways to skin that cat within the agreements, that you don't have to spell out equalization payments. There may be a way to evaluate things in such a way that everybody is made whole.
Well, there may be just differential franchise.
There's a difference,
Right.
I've said this before, the difference between dealing with water and sewer, you got no assets. It's just who's got the least liabilities. I'm just being honest. That's just it.
We owe.
And so, sewer is just a privilege to provide service. That's all you get out of it. And so, I think that's, something that everybody needs to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, on the timeline, Lawrence brought up a good point, because Joel said 2 or 3 years, and I was thinking, well, can we not do it by next legislative session? So 1 year is impossible. Is that true? We need at least 2 years?
So the next steps, I think, in my opinion, I think if everybody agrees that consolidation is the way that things are gonna go, you can start the process of valuation while we're waiting on the legislative changes to do that. There's no need to do that sequentially. That valuation piece is gonna take some time, and it can happen before the legislation before the act is modified.
So this is a chicken and an egg question. Who's gonna pay for the valuation?
So we had that discussion as
Like,
well.
You're gonna be like, yeah.
So I can't commit on behalf of any one funding agency, but what I can tell you is that I think the statement has been made that if meaningful steps are being made to make changes to the better, that there will be support. And there's ways to do that. One of the criteria for principal forgiveness under the SRF is consolidation. So, and DES, they do engineering only principal forgiveness. So you can do some of these things stepwise. Again, I can't commit that, but.
In a different question, Joel probably knows what I'm asking about, but like, for 20 years over here in Greenville, the sub-districts were like, our systems are fine. And Metro kind of found out differently when they started looking at them. So it's not just who's paying for them, but like, how do these evaluations get completely objective?
They don't.
I can agree with Joel. You have some grasp of it, and then you deal with that going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've given that. I would suggest nobody underestimate what's going to have to go into this. It's going to be harder and more work than you realize it's going to be.
And you're going to have to swallow harder.
Yeah.
Once you get that answer.
Yeah.
Trust me.
The neutral party gives you the number and then you work the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say that, and again, this is where, as you move forward, and you're gonna have to get buy-in from people. Be careful what you commit to, what you promise. Be careful that you don't overstate the need or understate. Because people are gonna remember those things, and so that's why I don't want us to get too far into the details on this, because it will become a sticking point at some time. And so I don't know that we can sit here today and figure out what the rate structure needs to be, what the transfer asset agreement. We can't do that. And the more we get hung up on those things, the less likely it is to move forward at this time. So that's just my opinion. But I know all those things need to be figured out, but not right now. I think what we're trying to do is just say, do we need to move forward, and is this a good path? So let me back up a little bit just to make sure. So bullet point number 1, the authority will be reconstituted and include the county as a member. We're all good with that? Okay. It shall provide the authority, have the power to provide retail sewer services within the service area. Okay. No restrictions on the ability to provide service. Okay. We talked about the consolidation of the systems, and I know there's a lot of details in that, but as a committee, do we believe that this is necessary to move forward to where we need?
Absolutely.
Yes. I got several nods. All right, let's move in.
The first bullet.
Yeah, we can reorder the bullets. That's perfectly.
Yep.
Maybe you could put them in a circle.
We'll work on a graphic.
Spiral. What's in the middle? I told it. Spiral.
Is it clockwise or counterclockwise?
Spiral.
There's Australian.
All right. All right, so let's move. The governing body authority shall be a 5-member board of commissioners. Let's stop right there. Do we believe 5 is the number? Based on the
I think that's a good number.
That's a good number. In the reconstituted, there could be ways to increase that number over time if necessary, but I don't think you want to start with any more than 5. Definitely don't want to go to 11. Never to 11.
14 would probably have a bad number.
Oh, good gosh, no. That's even an even number. That's terrible.
Hey, trust me.
That's why he's retired.
So there's been draft legislation proposed to amend the act to permit the new methods of appointing elected commissioners, appointing or electing. And so the recommended path forward is as follows. Full appointment of the new commission by the governor upon the recommendation of the legislative delegation for Monroe County based upon an appointed index of total customers. All right, let's talk a little bit about that. We're putting in here, I say we're recommending we put in here the what we feel is the best path forward, but I want to make sure everybody thinks that's the best path forward.
Reminder, there was 3 options. We
Okay, let me
tried to change that it was 1.
only because I'm an idiot and I didn't go to law school. We create an appointed index. Can someone tell me exactly how that's going to work and how we're going to? Are we looking for? We're just going to group people into districts? Is that the
Well, I
appointed
think
index?
That's our,
Catherine's got some information to share with us on
Yeah.
how this could possibly be done. You want to do that now?
Yeah, Lawrence, before I just pass out some maps, can you just articulate the importance of defining a service boundary and what that means with this legislative change?
And before Lawrence does that, let me say these maps are for reference only. We are not indicating any decision or any. Yeah, it is just a
This is not
visual.
suggestive.
These are hypotheticals of how
Yeah.
something could be
Yeah.
done based on existing boundaries today.
Please do not post this in your council chamber.
Do you want to give them back at the end of prior to?
Sure, that
Yeah.
might be helpful.
I'm just saying.
Okay, go Lawrence.
Yeah, so there's kind of a distinction that you have to think through in any type of governing body. So normally the reason that you would give like full county boundaries is if you had taxing authority and there were people that were being burdened with the taxes of having to pay to support the system that actually weren't receiving a benefit. We don't have that here because the joint agency doesn't have taxing authority. So the service area needs to be limited to those areas where services is actually provided, which would basically be a designation of obviously the constituent cities, but then introduction of the county adds a very unique element because there are folks that are obviously in the county that are not otherwise receiving service. And so identifying specifically what that looks like and giving someone the opportunity to potentially serve on this board and have a representative interest despite never having the opportunity to be a sewer customer is a really kind of unique question that has to be worked through. So it seems to me the best approach, because if that person obviously gets on, their main motion and main mission is going to be trying to get sewer service to their property. I think the designated area of service needs to be limited to those people that actually receive retail service from the organization. The appointed index is the way that you would identify the various service constituencies based on how many members are within those particular areas. So the way the appointed index would work is that if there are 100 members of the county that receive service, 1,000 members of the various constituent cities, you would have a determination based on relative percentages.
There's multiple maps.
And you round up to the nearest whole number based on those proportionate percentages.
I think you got it.
Yeah.
So, hey, Lawrence, can I ask you a question? Just so that I make sure I repeat back and understand it. So in identifying a service area of the entities receiving retail service, then if there was a new industry coming in or a subdivision going in outside somewhere, the annexation, they would be annexed in based on, say, approval of the county into the district, or how would you be enlarging the service area?
Yes, I think that's an interesting question, and I think you could probably have to hardwire it to something along the lines of, a permit to serve. You could potentially run it through the county. There's not real clear designated authority under the Joint Agency Act, because remember, the Joint Agency Act contemplates that it's just the systems that are otherwise being, obviously controlled. And so it's not an issue right now under the existing Joint Agency Act, because the way it works is that the territorial area doesn't really matter, because the members get to appoint whomever they decide they otherwise want to appoint. This becomes an open question that is not really solved, because what we're proposing with amendments to the Joint Act is not currently contemplated by the way things currently work. So I think you may have identified a way that, it probably needs to stay with the authority to identify if someone is just a service recipient, that it gets added to a new district, or maybe you designate that authority to some third party like the legislative delegation if they're going to be making the appointments, or potentially the election commission if they determine that someone is receiving service. But someone's got to certify that to them. The problem with identifying and assigning that to the county is then that gives the county the kind of an additional control rights that the other members don't have, despite being an equal member of the organization.
Okay. So if a subdivision, so let me repeat back again so I understand. So if say a big old subdivision wants to go outside Walhalla versus an industry near 85, what you're saying is there's not currently a mechanism to enlarge, although we can build that in, or we can go back to whoever is chosen that would be appointing members to gain approval to enlarge the district.
With that, can it be established where you define it as those that are receiving service or are within a certain radius of existing infrastructure?
So, Catherine, you want to speak to the maps a little bit? and how
Yeah,
they address
let's do that,
some of
especially
Yeah,
since
okay.
I should have just waited because you guys were like going through them.
I did.
Let me explain.
I didn't even look.
I appreciate you, Joel. Okay, so
And before she does that, I'd say, Chris, I think your suggestion is probably the best result. Because that way you're not having to have someone make some independent discretion. It's just where you're actually receiving service.
Okay, so the first map was the result of the multi-criteria analysis that Weston and Sampson completed as part of the 20-year master plan. And just to give a little bit of background, basically what we tried to develop is a 20-year projection of where growth would probably occur. So that was one layer. And then there's all these other layers, including proximity to major corridors, which is, makes sense to grow where you already have some infrastructure, where the public came to us and said they wanted to see sewer growth versus where they didn't want to see sewer growth. So those both fed into that multi-criteria analysis. We looked at prioritizing more heavy land uses like commercial, industrial, and then looked at proximity to the existing sewer as well as population density. So all of those things got compiled into one analysis, and the resulting map is that top map that you see. And so anything in green, not so surprising, especially because that's where the service area already is where we anticipate continuing to serve sewer. And then kind of that yellow is where that build out could occur based on all of those criteria. The second map removes the areas that are protected in some manner, which really takes a huge chunk out of that northwestern side, obviously because of Sumter National Forest. So the rest then you kind of see really focusing on that western edge of the lake, going up the eastern side of Oconee County, and then a little bit, you see a little bit of green down at that I-85 corridor. So what we wanted to do is start the conversation broadly, so I'm going to emphasize that. So if you go to the third map, which should be
The blue one.
And this is kind of messy, but it's intended to be because you kind of want to see how everything overlaps. So what we did is we took kind of that growth boundary line on that western side, and basically followed the multi-criteria analysis. And then we tweaked it ever so slightly to follow some major road corridors like 123 heading into Georgia. So we just kind of did a nice little buffer around that just so it's a cleaner line. What you see here are Walhalla, West Union, Seneca, and Westminster's boundaries. And then Westminster has a urban growth boundary that they've established. Most of what they have identified, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially they've looked at saying, hey, we know we want to grow and expand at some point, and we want to have some land use, not regulation, but at least kind of trend analysis completed. And so a lot of that is intended to be very rural in nature and low density. So that boundary could extend out to that purple potentially. And then what else you have here is the HUC 12s. So that's the watershed, so the natural drainage within the county. And then of course your 5 council districts, which you can see them a little bit better on that 4th map. Had to get everything on that 1 map just so you could see it all overlaid, but then if you go to that 4th map, it's a little bit easier to look at because we've just made the HUC 12 boundaries transparent. So what we wanted to do is leave that pink boundary is very big, and that is intentional for the conversation today because it follows the results of the 20-year master plan. But we figured you guys would have some comments. And in thinking about, I guess, next steps, it's not just the boundary itself, but it's how it gets cut up. And one of the issues with the council districts is the council districts segregate each of the cities into their own district, which could, in theory, exacerbate some of the same challenges that are experienced today. And so instead, one thought was to follow HUC 12 boundaries and follow drainage basins instead, which would enable you to kind of cut up the service area in a different manner. So I think
you're talking about 5 districts for the 5 commissioners inside. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, so we'll have to, in order for the 5 to be chosen by the governor, and Lawrence, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Okay, so I'm gonna just posit this.
Yeah.
I didn't imagine we do this. 5 commissioners, no sub-districts. I mean, that's how Greenville County is for REWA.
And that's another option to certainly discuss.
And I think
Because the effective thing becomes, the real rub becomes who in the delegation really selects these guys or women. And I guess it's weighted voting inside the delegation, and this is half the county delegation roughly.
Can I just ask a question? And I know I missed the last meeting and stuff like that. Is electing members at large off the table? Or is it such a big hurdle, we don't think?
I think one of the issues we had is determining from election standpoint, who would be eligible to be elected.
Right.
Within,
That
say,
boundary.
service,
Mhm.
the
And we
greater
want-
service boundary that you define.
We talked through that, and I can't remember all the issues that we discussed, but it seemed like it was something that was gonna be very challenging to do. Because who's gonna own the elections, where they're gonna, there was a lot in that.
Okay, so it wouldn't be like okay.
It was not the top recommendation. It's
Okay.
not something, it's still gonna be written in, I think, potentially written into the legislation, if that's an opportunity or an option. Is that correct?
Yeah, the election.
That's correct.
Yeah, but we're not
The issue
recommending
you
that
get
one
here as well,
unless.
in
That is
addition
not
to
the
having
preferred
to
recommendation
define the
at
service
this time.
territory, you also have to have equal voting. You got to comply with the constitutional provisions on
Yeah.
one man, one vote.
Yeah.
And so
That's
that's
why I
got
was
to be.
getting rid of them.
That was,
Yeah, so the election piece creates, it's not to say it can't happen, it adds a layer of complexity that is gonna have to be solved legislatively.
So let me expand on Sue's question and say, if we change the word elected at large, if we change elected to appointed at large, does that, Lawrence, does that get us?
Yeah, because then you don't have a one man, one vote issue, then you just have an equitable distribution issue, and as long as the appointment mechanism is applicable, then it's a valid appointment.
How do you avoid all 5 being from the same area if you don't have districts?
The delegation has to do that.
Okay.
They do it the way they do it. They make the sausage.
Imperfectly.
So that's
But
enough.
it, you know,
Both are options.
it kind of works. You
to
get
discuss.
qualified people willing to serve. You know, the senator says, hey, this one's your appointment over there to the representative, you know, because the senators have like super weight voting. And that's why I was saying, like, how do these appointments actually work out? Who actually makes them? I know it says the governor, but, you know, we all know in
It's a
reality,
delegation.
It's a
in
delegation.
reality, essentially the senators do it.
Right.
So, and again, I won't get too far into this, but can you hardwire into the process for the delegation to follow, or recommended process for them to follow to determine? I mean, you're seeking equal representation, you can't bind them to anything, they're gonna do what they're gonna do.
Boy, I would find that real hard for them to pass legislation that gives them any additional guidance than they want.
I think that would almost violate the rule that you can't bind a future council or future
Yeah.
body.
They don't want to be bound. They want to make sausage.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think people need to, having been appointed to things or had to go ask a senator to appoint me to something, yeah, it's sausage.
So if you can't put it in the legislative process, you can build, the new board could build it into their policies. This is our preferred method for board appointment
Or
and succession.
seek viable candidates to submit or to help identify
recommend, yeah.
viable candidates.
Well, can I go back and ask Lawrence, because was there something in, and it may have been in the study or it may have been in something that you worked on previously with this, that kind of established some guidelines for what qualifications someone may have to be eligible? Was it they did receive service, or they did have to live in the service area, or what? Was there something that you did to address that in the draft?
It's like
Yes,
qualified
I'm-
elector.
Yeah, I'm pulling it back up now, so I
Yeah.
actually don't just, 1 second.
Should be in the service area, I would imagine.
Yes.
You couldn't limit to just who has a connection now.
Yeah, so commissioners are required to hold the qualifications of an elector, which means they obviously have to be a qualified elector within the area defined. And then in the case of a gubernatorial appointment, we said such appointee must be a qualified elector, which means they've got to be a resident of Oconee County or one of the constituent areas residing within the area served by the joint system. That is the qualification.
But that area could be a block off of the service line or a mile off the service line, right? Like, we can define that, correct?
Yes, it's overly broad right now.
Yeah.
And you know, you can change that. I recently had a piece of special legislation passed this session for a client, and they identified it as an elector actually receiving service from this particular public utility. And so I think you can, you know, this language is still going to take a little bit of massaging. It's not been shared back with the legislative drafting folks yet, because we wanted to make sure we kind of had worked through this whole process, and we wanted to have sign off from the full commission before we submitted it. So we've got some flexibility to potentially adjust that if necessary.
Good question, Sue. Even after missing 2, you're still ahead of most of us. So.
No, I
You're
just,
ahead of me, how about that?
I wanted to the amount feasible. And I agree, Joel, that we don't need to give extra detail. To the amount feasible, my hope is that the recommendations are not just to solve this problem and that legislation, but builds the opportunity for what's the next question. When the next subdivision the next business that wants to locate, and it's not right here. How do you
What's the
adjust
mechanism?
that? What's the mechanism that allows adjustment? I just never had an experience where you gave like a distance, except, but because things don't fall in real neat. And a school wants to plant right here that's not in anything, but yet they really should have service because they're in the area and everything. So how do you do that? Now, we don't have to get every detail, but I'm just saying, I think we've grown a big area. I think you've used great information to get there. And living in this area, yes, you're gonna cross out the federal forest, you're gonna cross out other stuff. But it would just be, I think, good to know that mechanism and not make it so onerous. I guess my eyes rolled back when you said, gosh, you might go back to the delegation. Oh my God.
Well, I would, and I guess that's where I'm
It
a
going in
little
his-
different world. I would
Yeah.
think that would be at the discretion of the new entity if they provide service, as long as it's within that service boundary, and these are liberal service
Yeah,
boundaries.
as long as you're within, but the one you want that's outside. When you
How
want
do
to
you
do
deal with that?
economic development, and you want to do something else, and we don't necessarily, I mean, doing it within the service area is a big enough bite.
Well, and I'll put that back a little bit. You want some boundaries on who you can provide service to,
Yeah.
because if you got a subdivision with somebody that's influential who wants to go 10 miles out of it, and you don't want somebody being able to come and say, you're gonna serve this whether you want to or not. So I think there needs to be some autonomy within the group says, no, we're not gonna serve.
Yeah, I agree 100% with
That's
that.
So we deal with that, and that's the world I live in, because our service area is Greenville County plus. Well, we know that there's places we don't have lines within 20 miles.
Right.
But there's always that specter, hey, we want you to serve
Who's gonna come
this.
calling?
And you gotta figure it out. And so luckily we have a system where we can say no.
Yeah.
But I would think those are very important things that you need to think through, because it will happen. And to your point, no matter how big you build your current service area, there's gonna be exceptions to that, and how are you gonna deal with those? One obvious one that we probably need is, what are you gonna do with Anderson County? I mean, the planning,
If they come calling, what does that look like?
how are you gonna provide service to them? Because I don't know that they can provide service to themselves in that little corner down there, can they?
Not either
Not right
way.
now, not yet.
It wouldn't make a lot of sense.
So, I mean, those are things I think need to be thought about. How is it built into this process? This is how we're gonna handle it.
And that's a good example to play the game of, okay, maybe today they're not in the boundary that's defined, but what is the mechanism to add
Add the
them,
boundary.
right?
To
Then
expand
you
that
could literally
boundary.
go through that process.
That one would be part of the mechanism to add a member too, right? Assuming.
Yeah.
You need to
Or maybe
talk,
not,
I can
or
agree
maybe
with
not.
and I'm like Sue, when you talk about going back to the delegation,
Yeah. It's on.
that is a
Rocky
dangerous
road.
thing. And that's why I was asking, can you put things in there to limit in some way? I don't know that you can, but once it goes back to and it doesn't, I don't know how this statute, but they can, once they bring the legislation back up, within the act, they can do most anything they want to with it. So you gotta be careful. Oh, I'll give you that, but also you're gonna do this, or you're not gonna do that.
Yeah.
So,
I haven't had time to think this whole thing through yet, but with what you're saying though now is, if we say we do set a radius off of any infrastructure that we have in place, what would happen? I guess that would open it up that if someone wants to go and build, say we set a mile radius, somebody wants to go and build 2 miles away and they're gonna put in their own treatment system, do they then become the provider? How would that work? I guess it would. They would be outside of the
that's always an option.
service
if it
area.
gets approved. I think and Catherine, you can talk more about this. I think the thought was, it makes the most sense to not draw a radius, but figure out your watershed boundaries. where does it make sense to draw the line?
Right, and you've already got an adopted master plan where
That
you,
supports that.
that, right, that where it has been approved by the current board, that this is what our service area is going to be for the,
Can we set up the watershed boundaries as the service area?
That's what,
right.
I think that's what I would recommend, that you do that. And there may be some exceptions to that. Again, you got some road corridors and things like that you might want to go ahead and hardwire it, but for the most part, I would, where the water flows is where I'd set my boundaries.
Mhm.
That's just my thought. I mean, I don't know. But I guess the purpose of these, showing these maps is does everybody think it's a good idea to try to designate ahead of time the service boundaries? Not countywide, but to some
I think-
boundaries that make sense, that you can go ahead and define those things.
But remember, we don't get to define it. We've got to identify it in the general statute that then gives us the opportunity for that map to be permissible. And so we've got
Yes.
to think of ways to provide general legislative language into the statute that identifies the watershed boundaries as the justifiable area for service. And so that starts getting really complicated when you think about that, this appointment methodology. And so if you start deviating from just having those folks that are customers of the system or receiving receiving service from the system, I think you start running into complexities that you may not otherwise deal with.
I don't think they have to be receiving service, I just think you want it in the service area.
Well, that's what we thought, but is Lawrence saying that would, I'm confused.
Why can't you just say service area and then that's to be
Right.
defined at the
Okay.
local level?
Because who defines service area?
If the service area is, so if you wanted to do a general thing, it might be, you're saying we have to define, give roughly some type of a word description as to the use of,
Yeah, remember this has got to be generally applicable because it comes through the Joint Agency Act. And so anyone else in the state, if for example, Scott's, former commission at Anderson Joint, if they decided to move from a membership appointed methodology to a gubernatorial appointed methodology, someone has to then define the service territory of Anderson Joint Regional because it would be the same general legislation. And so conceptually it works, but you got to be able to have it such that it's generally drafted that someone has to be able to identify and define what service area is.
So,
And it's great to have a map, but someone then has to identify that that map is the service area and how that's determined on a generalized basis by statute.
Well, just to go back to your example of Anderson Regional, if you were to define our service area, we define our service area as a sum of our members' service areas, which are defined legislatively already. We actually had to expand, grow some of our member systems down into like Abbeville County. I think you're probably aware of that one, and up into Pickens County. What would be the problem with defining the draft service area as the service area of Oconee Regional? The one that, I'm looking at this big pink line that goes all the way around us. What's wrong with defining that as a service area?
You just got to make the determination as who is responsible for making that determination. Does the agency then get to determine its own service territory or its service area?
I think, ultimately, they make a recommendation to the legislature who
Require
defines the
legislation
service area.
change.
I'm just suggesting choose this, or choose something that's appropriate and allow the board to define areas that they are, I don't know, what would I call it? Active planning areas, and some inactive planning areas, so that there's some areas of this service, of this boundary that, aren't in the 10-year plan, so to say, that you can do what Joel's saying, that's nice, we're not going there. But if it's in the active planning area, then you say, all right, we'll go there. We'll come to your subdivision within a mile or whatever your whatever your criteria is, to define what an active planning area is. 'Cause at some point, I don't know how you define that area based on watershed only. That's not gonna work. So I think you go big and have them prescribe it.
Well, I guess the thought was, based on these maps, is you got the boundary, like you said, the red line, but within that, you got sub-boundaries that are based on watersheds to try to give some representation geographically within that.
Right.
I mean, but we could do everything at large if that's, I don't know if that needs to be part of our recommendation or not.
I think if you go at large, delegation is gonna pick districts. Simply because that's all they know now.
Yeah, they're gonna divide it up.
You're gonna sort it out.
Yeah.
And they all have weighted votes. So,
It'll
works
end
itself
up
out.
pretty similar to what it is now.
Well, that's kind of what we thought.
And I don't think it'll be intentional, I think it's just in your mind, that's how it works.
Right.
Those were air quotes, Lawrence, you
Yeah.
didn't get to see them.
So, I guess I'm still a little confused over the perceived complexity of defining the service area. I mean, when we do it, we draft up some legislation, we attach a map to it and says, we're expanding our territory, and here's the new map of the service area.
Right.
That's what I would.
So I don't,
But you're doing that as a piece of special legislation. You're doing that.
so they can't,
That's a special legislation for you as a multi-jurisdictional, multi-county.
so you don't have that same,
Delegations.
You wouldn't have that same authorization here, because remember, they're being created under the General Joint Agency Act, which is applicable to any joint agency created under this act. And the reason none of these things have ever been contemplated is because previously only the members appointed the governing board.
Right.
And so if they were going to appoint someone from their community that they're receiving service, what expands this is the fact that we now have an alternative appointment methodology by the governor, as well as a potential election methodology, which requires you to be a little bit more thoughtful about that scope.
Well, another thing that Sue just was asking me about is that expanding into Anderson County is a separate delegation.
Correct.
well, that's why I'm asking, you're going to have to figure that out. How are you gonna do it? Is it gonna be? All right. So I'm sitting here and still a little confused as to whether we can move forward with determining appointment by the governor based on a predetermined service boundary. If not, what would be the service boundary? How
I
would,
think it is the cleanest and easiest is you are a member of the joint agency if you're receiving service from the joint agency.
does that get the agency where it needs to be and
That's too limiting, there's
Yeah.
no growth capability.
I would, is there a way
But
that,
as you receive new service,
You expect.
you become a member.
When you say become a member, as you
Or
get
you
served,
become a member of the service area. You become a member of the joint agency service territory.
Okay,
Yeah.
kind of like a co-op.
Right.
so,
Correct.
Okay. that
So you
makes
just
more sense.
automatically become one.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I was missing the automatic
So they
part.
could define their own planning
Yeah.
area like you were talking about, but then the
Right.
members are still those that are connected.
all right.
That's-
So then the question now is, how do you determine where the five come from? Or do you? They could all be members of the same area? When I say the same area, the previous, say Seneca or so, or how do we want to?
so let me ask that question. If they are okay, so they're not in this nice drawn out thing. If in fact they're not getting service on my island of non-sewer, then the map later if they never get sewer, they might be that little circle, donut, they're a donut hole. Of not being part of the service area, right?
Correct.
Okay,
So the way it is currently drafted is that if it's the gubernatorial appointment, we would want to clean up this definition of service territory based on all the conversations we've had. But the description of how he would be currently appointed, and obviously all of this is subject to change because this is Lawrence like sitting in his office drafting legislation. So all of this can like be adjusted if y'all don't think it works. But the current version of it is based on an appointative index, whereby you take the total number of customers in the system and you divide them based on the various customers served within the jurisdictional boundaries of the particular systems. Now, the issue that creates, are you looking at the service boundary of the city, or are you looking at the municipal boundaries of the city? And so that's not currently contemplated. But so the rough math would be, if you had 3,000 customers or 5,000 customers, and you had 1,000 customers in each of the constituent cities and 2,000 customers in Oconee, you divide 5,000 or 2,000 by 5,000, you get a 0.4. You buy 1,000 divided by the 5,000 to get a 0.2, and so you'd have an appointative index that basically would roll up to the nearest whole number. And so Oconee County would get 2, and the constituent municipalities would all get 1 member. That's not the way it would obviously work. You'd probably have more members from Seneca based on that appointative index, and so that's where they would be appointed from. That is obviously not the only way to do this, but it's the way it's currently drafted.
but I don't think you want appointative, do you? Because then you're back to the same thing.
But it's being appointed by the governor.
Because they wouldn't owe their allegiance to the municipality, they would owe their allegiance to the governor.
Well, I can just tell you from experience how this works. Most of the time, the delegation is not gonna take an interest in this. They're gonna grease the squeaky wheel. A lot of times this becomes a chore
Yeah.
for them. So the easier you can make it on them and give them more cover when they don't have to make a political decision, they make a good decision, the better off you're going to be. Because they're gonna get, and if you make it too complicated, Lawrence, you sat through delegation meetings. They can't even figure out what a quorum is most of the time. When you start adding complex weighted voting to it, I don't know if you'll ever figure out. So I caution, the more complicated you make it, the harder they're gonna think it is, and the less likely they are to support it, so.
Well, I think the other thing about the appointed index, unless you say with municipal boundaries only, the minute you dissolve and say there are no members, and we're not doing that, and everybody's being served by Oconee Regional, I don't know how you come up with a point of index for customers who are outside the city, outside the municipal boundaries.
It's kind of circular, isn't it?
It is. That's one of the things we've been talking about.
But you can't do that.
And maybe I missed something from the different meetings, but I thought we had discussed multiple times that the cities still, and the county too, if I remember correctly, still wanted to have a say-so in appointing someone. So if this is taking all that out, I don't know that our council will be in support of this. If they don't have any, now, I mean, whether it's can't be a staff member or something, but to at least have a say of who they recommend to the delegation to pick from. So there's still some.
I agree with that.
I don't think you could ever stop the municipalities from recommending to delegations who they
So
would
the
like.
delegation will
Yeah, they'll have to lobby.
use that
They're gonna
recommendation, but you can always give it to them.
I don't think you're
They're gonna
gonna,
ask.
I don't think you can define the delegation. You can't pin the delegation down to having to take
And
one
I
of your
understand
candidates.
that, but if we take everything away and the city has no,
But the city doesn't own the system anymore.
well, if,
Because
just,
you-
if all of a sudden they're taken out, I don't know that they'll even look at consolidation because they'll see the two tied together, that if we give this away, we're also giving up any insight. I mean, that may mess that portion up. I don't know.
Well, that's the
I'm trying
thing
to
we gotta
anticipate
figure
any
out,
problems
because
that might
if
come.
we don't
I
have
wanna
support
go
to do
this
that,
route.
then this all falls
Yeah.
apart.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to do today. And I would challenge the cities, why do they feel like they need that direct
Yeah, what,
influence over the
what
agency?
impact does it have on that?
What
at that
risk?
point?
Because they neither own the system, they're not,
You're not
Planning for
operating the
the
system,
future.
you're not owning it, you,
But most of the customers they're gonna be their constituents, and regardless of is it an elected, an appointed, or a member city, everything's political. I mean, we can say it's not, it is. And
I mean, they
people
keep the
are
city
still gonna
pretty
go-
easy covered. I'm sorry, we'd like to help you, but that now
Yeah,
belongs to
right.
them.
It gives council cover, and the reality is, it's just an education issue. Like, if they complain their rates went up because of X, Y, and Z, you say, well, technically, we have X amount of deferred maintenance that costs this. If we were charging you for that, it would
or
be
they
this.
don't like a pre-treatment.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, you know,
but there's what we understand on behind the scenes, and then there's what.
but that's why I say it's an
Our
education thing for your constituents, but, you know, community is well, these are the alternatives.
I mean,
in
there's
reality.
gonna have to be a whole public campaign that
Yeah.
coincides with this,
Yeah.
100%.
So.
Up on the screen, just because Chris asked me, where the current system overlaps with the current HUC 12, so you can see it's much tinier area than,
That's very helpful.
so the blue is the member cities, and then the main trunk lines are in red. And then the force main in blue going down to Golden Corner. And then back.
have one watershed.
Chris, how important is it, having now looked at the maps and looked at that, how important is it to address the issue of what is on those watersheds? What's the stuff that goes into Anderson County?
What-
Nothing.
Yeah, right now, there's nothing in Anderson County at all. We have been approached as Oconee County, I believe, I can't speak to that in specific, but by Anderson County about serving over in that area.
That person's gone. And I've never heard a word from Anderson
Yeah.
since.
Well, we have, and Catherine, because I brought her into this as part of working on the master plan. We have been reached out to by several potential developers over on the Anderson County side of Exit 4. And with that portion being identified in our 20-year plan, we're looking at refining how those people could be served currently. So that's being, that currently is being,
That's
Look at-
developers, though,
right.
not county.
right, it's not the county. Now, we haven't heard directly from anybody with the county. So, it's just hearsay, but they said they've spoken with representatives with the wastewater agency, with the county, correct, Catherine, and that they would be interested in at least pursuing us looking at serving that area. Is that what you understood
Yeah,
as
I mean,
well?
you basically told the developer, like, you can go do this legwork and ask if the county, Anderson County wants to serve you or not, and then.
Yeah, because we don't want to get in the middle of anything between us and Anderson County or
Right.
Oconee and Anderson County.
Right.
We want Anderson County to kind of bless that portion of it. But to date, we've not heard, ever since that person approached us several years ago with Anderson, we haven't heard anything at all directly from them.
And I'm just saying that when you get multiple delegations, it adds that extra complexity.
Yeah.
If this could be built with one delegation, it's complex enough right now.
I don't know how the lines are drawn, it could be the same delegation member or some of
It will
them.
be.
had-
That's what I was thinking here. I was saying, the same person that represents the Townville area is probably,
Not state senator. I just
Not
looked
the,
it
not
up.
the state senator, no.
That's correct.
Yeah, I
It's
just
not,
looked that up.
yeah.
The state senator cuts at the Oconee line, which goes off.
And besides, that's subject to change anyways, even if it
Well,
did.
And
Right.
I've mentioned this before,
Now
this
it's
is
number one
not
That's
for
right.
today, but,
or two.
if this falls apart and we can't figure out a way to reconstitute, I say we, because that's what we're tasked to do. It could be a step as a multi-county, a new entity that's multi-county. That overcomes a lot of these hurdles. Y'all may not want that, but that's something the delegation could step in and do if you can't figure it out. They can sure make it happen. And then you'd have representation from Anderson County in that area as well.
Oh, I guess the thing we could always do is just say that whatever this organization is, would be an Oconee County specific organization, and we would contract, we could figure the Anderson part out later on, whether they want to come in
Or just
or
be a,
just be a,
yeah.
you can just,
Contract.
yeah, contract.
Oh, yeah, that makes it an easier way if you chose to do it.
And that way
Especially
it's
'cause
not
logically-
binding us here today, so we can keep moving forward.
Just a question. Bringing them in as a contractor, how's that any different than what you are right now? You're basically, Anderson County's gonna have a collection system and they're gonna contract you to serve, and you're gonna have the same problem with them that you have with the members now.
Well, they wouldn't be on
They
the,
won't be on
they
the
wouldn't
board.
have representation on the board.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying when it comes down to controlling the flow, right now, the issue seems to be that, the collection systems aren't equitable.
Well, that's where,
And there's pre-treatment rules and all.
I didn't mean to even bring this, it was in my stack of stuff that I just grabbed and brought in here, but, so, this goes back to what we were looking at doing and have discussed several times and even looked at it with our sewer use regulation. And this, sorry Joel, this is what REWAT does, they permit those systems, correct? And I can't talk about the specifics of it, but they essentially, I guess
So
REWAT
Steve does it.
controls that, mandates that they meet those requirements, or I guess there's built-in
I told you, Oconee
repercussions.
has the same authority today to do that.
We gotta put Anderson in the box of like jump that ditch when you get to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So I
agree.
think there's
Yeah,
mechanisms in place that we currently have now that can address that if anybody, whether it's them or any entity here
Okay.
chooses to own, operate, maintain their system. I think we'll address that when we get to it. I think that, I think we just need to keep moving forward with.
Well, that being said, keep it moving forward, because we're on the timeline. So
So make
it doesn't sound like, make my vacation. It's all about me. So in talking through the appointment, it sounds like we've got some resistance even on having the members appointed by the delegation.
So what about the discussion regarding the transitional committee? That's in our minutes. We all kind of, it's skipped over entirely now, but I think it would appease some of the cities to hand over what they perceive as an asset or perceived control, because you're gonna have elections at the city level and the county level, so it could be a diluted process rather than an immediate let go of everything, Jesus take the wheel moment.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the resistance that you're feeling. When we first got a feasibility study, it said one from each city, the county, and then one from legislative, and everybody said, okay, yeah, sure. And then all of a sudden they say, nothing. Now, that's a big jump.
Well, again, I think the purpose of this committee is not to tell how to get there, but where you need to be.
I understand that.
Once we make a recommendation, then the current board and everybody can figure out, all right, this is the plan. This is how we're gonna get there. If it's an interim step of council or whatever that is, then how do you make that happen to get there? Because I don't think we're gonna be able to figure those things out on the front side of a recommendation, because that,
No, but as a committee member, what do you think your city would agree with?
Oh, I definitely think that would be fine.
The transition?
That would
That would
make
be
it
much more
smoother. I mean,
manageable.
So,
I think that
Amanda,
would be
can
fine.
you articulate how you see this transitional committee working? Is it to replace the current board? Is it to?
Yes.
Okay.
But what you're gonna have to do is take something out of the hands that it's in. And I wouldn't be on that transition committee. I don't have a hand in it right now. I mean, it's in the minutes, pretty defined, what I described last time. You could do it staggered. I mean, there's no set way. It's the first time, so you get to create
Figure
your
it out as you
own,
go.
you get to create your own parameters there. But I think it would give each member city a comfort level knowing that we put this person in here to stop the way that it's working now, to start the process of how it may work in the future, rather than going, man on the street, come flip this coin over. But the city has 40 years of history, millions of dollars spent, and a representative base that's gonna be coming back to them if
So-
the first transition doesn't work.
We also talk about needing somebody to kind of shepherd the process. Does that become the group that shepherds the process?
Yeah, I think
I would
so.
say
And that's not bad.
So-
The only question I have is, how is that group gonna let go any different than the current group?
they have a
They're
term,
gonna let go.
a defined term.
Yeah.
On this date is your last
So-
day.
No, I mean, like, let go of the existing, we don't want to give up. Like, the existing feels about
Because their
transition.
purpose is transition. Right now, there is no purpose with the current board
So I
to
guess-
transition.
So Mike, let me ask a couple of questions, and Lawrence, if you're still listening, is there
I'm
a,
here, so I was about to pipe in, so.
is there a legal way to do that currently? And would that take a legislation change in order to be able to set it?
Yeah.
And it-
So that's what I was gonna say, we're adding an additional layer of complexity into the general legislation that doesn't currently exist. So there is, the statute doesn't contemplate a reconstitution of an existing, entity. And the idea of a temporary, ad hoc or transitional committee would have to be something that we would have to then layer in as an additional authorization into the statute.
Could that committee be just part of the existing authority? Like, does it have to transition to the next group before that transitional committee is a part of it, or can that just be the current authorities board saying, okay, this committee is now moving forward, and that's just something they do internally to them?
Well, but if you eliminate the board to this new committee, all your swag documents have to be rewritten, correct, Lawrence?
Well, I mean, that's gonna be the whole process going forward. I mean, you could basically give them, they could be an ad hoc committee similar to this one, that could be the ad hoc transitional committee that makes recommendation.
Right.
And if you set them up such that they could then potentially also qualify under whatever methodology the governor is also going to appoint, and you get a wink and a nod from the senator that says, hey, these transitional members are also going to be the first members of the organization, I think you could theoretically kill two birds with one stone.
I think
but
we could get the wink and the nod.
Otherwise, you're going to have some pretty robust language allowing for this transitional committee that doesn't currently exist in the statute.
Could the existing members add the county right now?
Yes.
By
So
unanimous
it's gonna
vote
take
of
2
each
years
member
to do
city.
this. If they added the county like this summer, then we'd have a 2-year transition de facto.
Mm-hmm.
This legislation's got a 2-year kicker on it, so that's kind of why I was asking about like which comes first. That comes back to that iterative thing, but when we get the legislation, I really wish that was just pull the Band-Aid off. I'm afraid if we go to a transitional thing, it'll just stop there.
That may be the best place to go.
I don't think it solves 90% of what we've been talking about.
I don't think it'll get solved with the member cities as it sits, just flipping the coin though.
What does that mean? Just elaborate on it.
Celia's hesitation with her council.
That her council would not,
Yeah.
let me read it,
I don't know
that
that
her
any
council
city is
would
ready
be
just to let go.
reluctant to say
Yeah.
that the council would prefer to stay in the sewer business, no matter how painful, than give their assets to,
I don't think they'd prefer to stay in the sewer business, and Celia's sitting right here, so I don't want to speak for you. I think what they want is a say-so on who's
We'll say-
representing
And
their
I think it
interests.
may be the other
Rates.
cities too. I know I open my mouth, but I think the other cities, based on what we've discussed in the board, could potentially still want some. And right now, the way the makeup is, the board has to, and the member cities have to approve any of these changes.
I understand that, I'm not, I will just say, I truly think until the entities are willing to have a independent and give up their assets, I'm just gonna tell you, I think you will never fix stuff that you think you wanna fix. There will not be enough, you'll have failing systems and challenges. And if the idea is to hold control, and I understand why politicians do that, believe me, I get it. I'm gonna tell you, then they are voting for a path to continue not having an effective sewer system in Oconee County. And yeah, you can quote me on that. That's what you vote. Their choice not to is a vote for.
You have to keep in mind, none of them know the complexities of all these issues either, though.
I hear that, I'm just saying, and I think it's important they understand, but, and that's a lot of communication, which Celia, you brought up from day one, communicate. I think that's essential, but if you want sewer to be effective in this county, then the collection system's owned by the different partners, all operating independently under a board that's themselves, is gonna be, tomorrow will be as effective as yesterday. But I think your point is, if they're reluctant, then that means a big communication opportunity.
So I think a little bit to Amanda's point, I think the committee's job is to figure out what is the best system long-term. So 10, 20 years from now, what should the structure be, which I think is what's proposed here. Now we're just arguing about how involved we are and how we get there.
Right.
And what those interim steps are to get there. So if there's if the lack of participation by the cities, giving it up immediately, because we're saying you give it up. Now we're just arguing about the timing.
Yeah, but I think, you start a dilution process in a way when you have sunsetting here, and this board body is gonna change, city council members are gonna change, my county council members are gonna change, so there's some dilution. You're going from total control to and I think everybody in the long term wants the great benefit. I think they want that benefit.
I don't think they realize what the benefit really is, though.
I don't
because
either.
If they get the system, they consolidate it, then the concern is we've got no control over the rates, but they don't really have control over the rates anyway, because they're gonna have to go through and do all the work to fix all the problems.
Correct.
And it's better to
But
spread
they
it
think
out
they
through the
do.
whole system,
Yes.
and that's the thing I think that they don't understand, is it's gonna be better off in the long run for everybody and lower cost if you do this, and I don't know the best way to relay that to them so they understand.
Let me make a comment.
Keep in mind, there's
I want
no
you guys to take
requirement
this-
for running for municipal office.
So
You
let
can
me
be
make
as
this
intelligent
comment,
or as
please,
not
Amanda. Y'all hear y'all saying they don't understand, but there's been a study on the table for how long now?
They don't understand.
Nobody's explained it to them, they haven't
Yes.
read it,
Yes.
so how do they not understand the issues and the potential solutions?
It's the
Because
fear of
Nobody
change.
owns them.
Yeah.
None of them own
So
those.
therein,
issues.
we're gonna continue to give them ownership of something they don't wanna own to begin with. Because if you're gonna own the system, you gotta own the responsibility that goes along with it.
And a legal responsibility.
Yeah.
And I realize that DHEC, well, whoever it is holding you guys as the legal responsible party. Then I'd say you guys just go home.
Well,
No, I'm just saying, if that's the issue, then
Yeah.
let
and we are, we're working with the cities currently, and I know Ms. Myers, we contacted her last week. I guess starting February 2024, we began enforcing our sewer use regulation on the cities after a period of about 2 or 3 years to try to find the issues with our system and be able to identify and confirm that the satellite sewers, the cities, were contributing inflow and infiltration to us, and to do our best to quantify that. And that effort is still going on. But as part of that, we required the cities to develop their own corrective action plans that establish timelines and meet certain criteria to rehab their systems if they were, as they are today, which is to remain owned, operated, and maintained by those cities. Well, back last week, we put that on hold with them pending the direction and recommendations of this board. That come July or August, we're gonna have to begin enforcing that again, because again, that was part of the expectation from then DHEC, now DES, that we enforce our regulation equitably across all of our users, and whether that's an individual connection or the satellite system as a whole being a user. So that may speak to what you're doing now. So we don't know really, in a way, again, we don't know exactly how hard we can push those upstream systems to correct issues. We have certainly, and I think I spoke about this several months ago at one of our earlier meetings, we encourage them to budget, we encourage them to rehab the system, but without, how hard do we go and
Well,
push
based
that?
on, with the regulations you got in place now, you're bound to push.
Mhm.
You have to. It's not an option of not.
Mhm.
I mean, I can see having it on hold right now to see where this goes. That makes sense, but, I mean, if this falls through, you still got to push right on and push hard. I mean,
Well,
you
that's
don't
what-
have that option.
Yeah, and that's where I go to, that's why I asked for this, because I think that's what we would do ultimately, is have to permit each system, just like we're permitted by the state, and conduct inspections and oversee that process, just like the state does with us, because that's what we clearly understand the state expects us to do, is step in on their behalf to do that job. Is that, and I guess you had the same.
Yeah, I would change the language a little bit. You're not doing it on their behalf. It's your responsibility.
Right, it's our
It's not the state's
responsibility.
responsibility to regulate your users.
Mhm.
Right, right.
That's your responsibility.
Correct.
Maybe don't delay, maybe start enforcing.
Did you have one more thing before?
Well, I just get back to where we seem to be stuck up on voting and how we're gonna constitute members. Is there what would be the downside of going back to going gubernatorial appointments, and allowing, using the appointive index that we talked about before, and allowing Walhalla, Westminster, to appoint a single member, and the county to appoint a single member, and Senate could appoint two. That's what the appointive index, it sounds like it's gonna do. With the recommendations from those entities right now, and that would give you your transitional committee. Assuming you can get the alleged delegation to buy off on it. And then, I hate to say trust, but trust the delegation in the future to do as they need to do with the guidance of the appointive, the index that you're talking about. How you spread the population, or how you spread the votes, whether that second vote stays with Seneca forever, or whether it goes to Walhalla or Westminster or the county or whatever, by region. Because I think that provides a little bit tighter alignment with the Joint System Act. Right now, the minute we start saying we're not even gonna recognize that there are members, I'm not even certain that this qualifies under the Joint System Act, because we've taken everything member-wise. In the Joint System Act, my understanding, nothing more than it's a financing authority for municipal associations. Well, the minute we no longer have any municipal members of any type, and they don't have any assets in it,
Right.
nor do they have any say in it, nor do they have anything, I don't even know if this qualifies under the Joint System Act. Like I said, I certainly didn't go to a good Indian law school, and the 2 law classes I took didn't deal with any of this.
Well, I think that's the crux. We're trying to
I'm just-
square peg into a round hole. This has
And-
never been the right solution for you, but we're trying to get it as close to the right
And
solution
I'm
we
saying
can.
is if we go back and we say we allow the member systems that have contributed their assets, but still wish to maintain some level of input, I won't say control, but input, and we feed the delegation with our transition committee members, whoever they may be, five members that, county picks one, your city picks one, your city picks one, you get picked 2, all right, or recommend 2, because you don't get to pick them, you get to recommend.
Right.
But I don't think the delegation's gonna run over the municipalities in the county, at least initially. They're gonna, this is what you wanna do, this is what you need to do, go with it. There just needs to be an expectation that the second time this comes up for reappointment, that, we expect recommendations, but we don't expect you to kind of only send me,
Each time you make a
don't send me
recommendation.
just one, and don't be surprised if someone else sends one and we pick them.
So, I don't think within the recommendation we have before us, we have to determine it just recommends that we
Yeah.
use the delegation appointments to set a board, right?
But I think to the comment over here, I think in order to get this moving, there probably need to be some kind of side conversation about how you're going to seed it so that you at least strongly encourage the formation of the transition.
I don't disagree with that. That goes back to my comments earlier. Can we give guidance through this process to help?
Yeah.
But for us to make a recommendation, I don't know that we need to spell all those things out, because we can sit here and think it's a good idea, then next month won't be as good idea, it'll be another idea.
Since the corner over here is gonna have to draft this, the additional point is going to be this transitional board,
I don't even know if you say that.
okay?
Just initial appointees.
I
I
think
mean,
Initial
add-
board.
Just the initial board.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think just saying initial board.
Okay. So are we, Amanda, you had mentioned that the transition piece was not in here. Do we want to do away with that?
I think as long as we all understand it and we understand the job moving forward, and I think
Because what it
said
sounded like,
best was that everybody knows what's best for a long time from now, but it
Getting
seems
there.
like a long time from now.
Right.
The immediacy of doing it, I think, will be the hesitation trigger
Sure.
for a lot of that. And I live in Walhalla, so I'm not speaking on Sylvia's behalf, but I know the people she's talking about, obviously. And there will be hesitation on my council not to have, quote unquote, some kind of say-so.
Okay.
Because we didn't come this far for them not to have, they hadn't had a say-so all these years, and
Right.
suddenly we don't get any say-so.
Right.
And, it doesn't make sense for them. Because it is perception,
Right.
even though we all understand the benefit.
Shane is, the one that's kind of in the middle of this whole thing. I can totally understand it, me working and speaking with councils and with staff, administration, utilities directors. I can certainly see that, and I can see the benefit of it as well, to having that transition. You've had Mr. Parrish has been on the commission for what, 22, 23 years?
He loves everything.
Now, what I did hear Lawrence say is that
That's right.
the current board, with approval, unanimous approval by all the current members, could go ahead and add the county now.
And then we just decide
And-
amongst ourselves. to
And then
be
you
the
can
transition.
do an ad hoc.
Yeah.
Okay.
So would that take us to 10 commissioners? Or
Would
would
the
that,
requirements set aside for elector or whatever, would that apply to the transition committee? Because if it did, then that's gonna wipe out most of the board.
That's a good question and a valid point.
Yeah, if that applies to that committee, then that's our board, or however you wanna look at it, that's gonna,
because I don't know how many are on our customers currently.
well, they're associated with the city or customers, or, that would wipe me out, several others on there currently who are working for the city, so.
Yeah, there's only 2 right now that don't work for the city.
Correct. So, that's something to consider.
Those 2, I don't think either of them are on sewer.
So we have a recommendation in front of us.
So the line that you think should be added says what?
That's what I'm trying to get to.
And again, that's the reason, we've been going through this for several months now, and there's a lot of things coming to the table today that, this has been out there since the last meeting virtually. So we're sitting here today and we're bringing new issues back to it that weren't commented on, but that is what it is. So we got a recommendation from us. We're gonna, as part of the recommendation, I hear we're gonna add some language that allows for some interim leadership to get us to the final leadership. Now legally, I don't know how we can do that, but where our recommendation says we recommend some interim. Yes.
And if I can speak, and apologize for me saying this, but I just sit here and I look around the table here and include Rivers in this as well. And I think you've got 1, 2, 3, you have 4 that are here that are on, that are on the board. I'm kind of stuck maybe in flux or in the middle, and you have the rest of them that are outside, and then you have Chip, who's a non-voting member of this whole thing. So I think that there has to be at least some thought in here of a compromise to get whatever that recommendation voted on and approved by those around the table. So, from what I understand and what I hear, that is, that you very well, without that, you very well could lose 4, certainly 4 votes, and they're the ones 3 of those are the ones that sit around here currently.
So the point being, we just said we're gonna add the compromise.
Yes,
to the
I
language.
agree.
So,
That's a long way for me to say, yes, I think that would be a wise idea to do it as a
well,
compromise.
and when we poll in just a minute, we're non-binding, we're gonna see if we got support to move this thing forward. I'm saying that's gonna be part, it's not written down here, but that's a part of the recommendation, is we're gonna pursue the appointment process, but we're gonna have an interim solution that assures representation from the current members.
Based on the
Transition
appointive
veterans.
index.
Based on the point, whatever that language is.
Will Westminster and Wahala agree with the appointive index? In your opinions?
For now, at least for the recommendation.
So I think that translates to one,
Yeah,
a point of a one,
it's no different than.
Yeah.
There's a history.
yeah, okay.
Well, the only difference is going to be, if you go back to the appointed index, Scott's point is true, you're gonna lose a lot of your current board members.
Yeah.
Almost by definition, you're
Well,
gonna
pretty
lose
much all-
some, because you're
mainly
gonna
the
try to
whole
trim
board.
it 5. All right, so you're gonna
Yeah.
lose some that way, and you're probably gonna lose some that don't qualify,
Correct.
based on some of the other criteria.
Correct.
And
Is that a bad thing?
I don't know, but.
That's what I'm asking.
Let me ask you, let me put it this way, would it be a bad thing if it replaced every one of them and you had no experience?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be the case.
That may be the case, actually.
And I'm just suggesting
You
that.
may have a lot of leadership right here. Don't forget.
So don't include the appointive index,
I wouldn't.
just say appointed by,
For the transition.
for the transition,
And then
it's just appointed
the
by.
appointed index take effect.
After the law?
When it's handed over.
After
Yeah.
the
Okay.
law.
Can I withdraw my word transition and just make it the word initial?
Sure. Sure.
Is that comfortable for everyone?
That's essentially what you guys are doing with the fire district, right?
Yes.
Is there, the first person
Initial.
being seated by the county council
Correct.
until that election takes place?
So we would default to that initial board kind of being set up to Celia's comment, the way we, the way we had it in the feasibility study as an example. This is how you could constitute,
Which includes the county.
yes.
And that gives everybody a period of time to take that giant leap backwards.
But
and
to
let go of
do
the
that,
reins a little bit.
the county's gonna have to be added. Amanda,
Ma'am?
the county's gonna have to be added. That is a step in there that has to happen to get to this initial board before you reconstitute. Okay, got
All
it.
right, so reconstituted to include county as a member, everybody's good with that.
We're starting back over.
Well, we go
You
in
only got
circles.
halfway.
Reconstituted shall provide, the authority shall have power to provide retail service. I didn't see any pushback on that, whatever you meant to do. We talked about the collection system consolidation. And it sounds like if we can get to this initial board, we're not gonna say transitional, but whatever, that's what it, if we can get that solved, then that may take care of that. That gives, okay? Is everybody? And then I think everybody was fine, I think, with electing commissioners through, or appointing commissioners through the delegation, if we can get this transitional thing taken care of.
The initial board.
The initial board.
And then, so to Catherine's point, how, do we just want to have it within that boundary? Do we want to have sub-districts set up? How do we want to set that for the future for the appointments? With all the maps?
Do we need to do that as part of the recommendation? Do we have a statement that says we're going, the part of the initial board will be to determine.
To figure
the
that out?
future?
Yes. We can do that. Okay.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right.
And is there a timeline on the initial board? Like, if you don't
I
set
would
deadline-
say part of our recommendation, there should be a timeline. I don't think we
If
need
you
to
don't,
describe
then we'll
what it
just
is
continue.
today.
Can we, so I know that, because that's been brought up by Mr. Bronson, is this something that we could task maybe Lawrence and Joel and Angie? To possibly discuss
I so happen to
between
have a
now
card.
and our next meeting to give us what those timelines may be. Because I think, Lawrence probably would be the best one to see this realistically.
I would lean, again, to our experts, say this is a common sense timeline
Yes.
based on the legislative calendar, the things that need to be done.
Well,
But I don't think we can do that today. We might can do it by the next meeting.
Lawrence, is that something you could work on to just send just an initial draft of what you feel we would need to be looking at as far as what would have to go onto a timeline?
Said he was only gonna be on for 20 minutes ago.
Is that right?
We'll reach
He's
out.
still, yeah,
He's still showing.
We're gonna
Yeah.
reach out to him anyway to
Yeah.
kind of flesh a lot of
Yeah,
this out.
yeah.
Let's do that. I think you guys have captured what we're talking about. So I want to, because I want to be respectful for your time. You may have a lot to say,
No, just
Okay.
a little bit, not much.
just a little bit. Based on the conversations, the amendments to what, the recommendation. All right, Catherine, I want you to help me because you got the language of support over there. I just want to know, because we want to bring this back next month as an actionable item for this committee. Okay? And we need to know, I think today, is it going to be supported or is it not? I'm not telling everybody you have to vote for it or whatever. I mean, I think we need to know. If this is going to fall apart, then we need to know it's going to fall apart, then you're going to have to figure out something else.
Something we know that everybody can support.
So, Scott, I want to start with you.
Well, this also means that like you support it at this level such that you're going to bring it back and educate the people who have to vote on this, because it's super critical that they're not here in the room, and it's your job to say this is why I feel this way.
Does that fall on each of the representatives here?
Yeah,
For
yeah, I
the
would say
city?
that's
They're
100%.
represented.
Okay.
Because if you go back and you have said you're a 1 today, and you go back and say this is trash, don't vote for it, you're not doing us any favors. So I'm just being honest here.
Chip, would you be available to help out with that if so called upon by them?
Okay, so we got 5 levels of support here.
This is a test of consensus. This is not a vote.
This is not a vote.
I'm all in, 1.
You're 1.
It's the right thing, has to be done.
Scott?
And I think we're gonna be okay, but I'm like Celia, I think our council and mayor are gonna want some input, especially initially.
All right, so we've addressed that in the recommendation,
Right.
because we're gonna try to allow that as much as we legally can in the
Right.
process.
That's my understanding.
So you 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
As long as we've got that in there, I think I would be at 1.
Also, 1, provided the language suits the needs of the concerns.
one.
You're a 1?
One.
I'll say 1.2.
That is not an option. No action.
1/2. Okay,
You can be a 2.
Okay, 1.
Chip, you're not a voting member. Is Rivers still on? Is he a voting member?
He's a voting
Yes.
member.
Rivers, are you still there?
One is strong support.
Yeah.
Full
full
sorry, yeah.
Full endorsement. 2 is endorsement with minor points of contention.
I'm a 0.5.
Okay.
Less than 1. I'm about a 3. No, I'm just kidding. Does anybody left?
You.
Anybody left?
Just
You.
you.
That's on
Me.
record now.
I'm all in.
Awesome.
Great hard work.
This
It
is,
has been.
this has been good work today, folks. I know this is hard, but it's going to be worth it for the community. So we've all said we're ready to go. So that means we got some work. I say we, when I say we, I mean y'all. We got some work to do to make sure that we can do what we said we're going to do.
Yes, we'll get up with Lawrence next week. Luckily, my calendar is fairly
I think those are
flexible.
some very good points that were brought up that can help this thing. I'm by nature impatient. I like for it to be done. You can't tell that, can you?
Scott, you literally feel your buzzing vibes sitting next to you.
Sorry. He's retired. This is the only thing keeping him in business.
So before we adjourn,
Mr. Adams. I don't know.
would you like to,
We don't.
you have some,
I'll take it.
some comments?
There are certain ways.
Couple.
Oh,
One
that's
comment,
about
as I've listened to discussion this morning. I went back to the last fall when Angie presented the regional feasibility study. Made a recommendation that formed this ad hoc committee. You had some other recommendations. Timeline, we've been talking about timeline. Toward the end of that study, there was some timeline. And that was one, what I call nuclear option. That was, this can't be worked out. That'll be turned over to another agency to do. Now, listening to all this discussion, I don't know how binding that would be, because you got legislation, you got laws, and all I say is I'll pray for you guys. I'll pray for you. I don't know how it's gonna work out. It may end up being a Mexican standoff and ABC company operating it. Who knows what's going to happen?
We're all gonna try this one. We're all gonna try things.
Okay.
Look at D5.
D5, did I miss something?
Yes, sir.
And there were definite timelines on that too.
Consider posting meeting minutes.
And this was an item that had been brought to me by one of our commissioners.
So we're not
who's not
posting-
represented today, and the board was supportive of this from what I understood the other day. So what has been happening is, with these being a committee, they were going before the board for acceptance or approval, and at that time, we would then post it, which is a 2-month process before they get reviewed and approved here. So this would just allow for us to make these meeting minutes public upon approval by this board and not the full commission.
Yeah, if your commission's in support of it, because that ultimately, if they said that's what they want to do, then that's what we'll do. So is everybody in favor of that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, we have a say so. If that's what they want done, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So the minutes we approve today will get posted, right? Okay.
Right.
Thank you for bringing that. I had forgotten that.
Does that need to be a vote or is that?
I think so. I think that would
Should be.
require a vote.
We got it.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Like I say, I always defer to the board to make this, but if we can vote on it, if that's what helps, we'll do it. We got a public comment in. We don't have any other publics here today. Appreciate you being here today. Our next meeting is scheduled June 12th.
Is there any possibility of changing that date? Out of town that week.
So what?
I also will, SCCCMA,
Yeah.
is that where you're gonna be?
No,
No? Okay.
catamaran.
I will be, also not be available, because I'll be at a conference.
I think we probably need to.
What
The
day?
delay would be
Did you
good.
want that week but not that day, or did you want a different week? Oh, okay.
Can we move it 1 week to June 19th, to Juneteenth?
That'd be a win for me.
That's a
AWWA
holiday. That's a
is
holiday.
separate.
Yeah, I'll
It's
be
a
at
holiday
I'll be
for
at
you?
A's too. So the
Is that
19th
holiday
works.
for you?
Can we-
Would you want it earlier in the week or something else? Or Angie, you're gonna be out?
No, just that
Eighth
June
week.
8th week I'll be out. So that's the second full week of
June
What about
16th, it's a
16,
Monday.
17, 18?
Yeah, I should be able to do.
Joel, do retired people work on Mondays?
As long
Or
as
do
it's
we
not
need to
too
make it
early in the
Tuesday?
day.
Yeah, the 17th,
I'm
18th.
teasing, what?
No, no tea times.
17th isn't good for me.
Amazingly, I'm open all week, so.
Monday, June 16th. Anyone? Bueller?
I can make that one.
Nobody says no?
Yeah. I can make it work.
Because it's a Monday, do you want an extra hour that morning, Chris? Or it's 9?
Whatever y'all like to do.
I know you're here, but sometimes Monday mornings require a little extra time.
No, I'm fine with it. It's being at 9.
Okay, 9 a.m., 16th. Thank y'all for the accommodation.
Oh, yeah, me too.
We probably would enjoy having another week.
Yeah.
So is there, don't want to put too much on you guys, but when we get that language figured out, can we go ahead and get that disseminated
Yes.
to the group for
Yes.
comment? Be sure nobody's surprised, we got everything teed up and ready to go.
Please.
100%.
Okay.
Chris, I think you have to change the meeting invite.
I'll go.
I
Yeah.
think you did.
I was trying to. I'm like, oh,
I know, I was
that's
like,
not
I
my
can't
meeting,
do this
bro.
Just kidding.
And Catherine, I'm sorry, I'm the one that has to get the documents in Word. My IT is
Oh, you're
nuts
fine.
about me putting in my
Oh, I
credentials
get it,
on the
yeah.
third-party website. They're nuts.
Even it's just your email. It won't let you put your email?
No.
That's crazy. No problem.
Interesting, Kenny has
So,
interesting rules about
keep
that.
in mind-
Amazon
Yes,
on the
sir.
clock. You don't,
I do it on my phone.
but you pay for it yourself.
Yeah, of course. Y'all have to keep in mind though, you know, we had a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
$220 million.
How much?
220, and we beat it with in-house IT staff.
That's
wow, that's-
And 4 days later, the city of Atlanta paid it.
Oh, wow.
They got hit same time we did. Yeah. So my IT guys, and you know, we don't outsource any kind of IT, so they're like literally nuts because it's theirs. You know what I mean? They built the system
Little
ground
pride
up.
there,
What's that?
little pride.
Oh yeah.
That's good. That's all that means you're successful.
They got invited to go to Nova Scotia to the North American Cybersecurity Council to give advice to the FBI on how to handle it.
Good.
Some guy went to Westminster High School or Westlake High School.
That's great.
Yeah, a few college classes, and he's just a
That's
total
awesome.
nerd. Yeah, total nerd. I mean, he's a cool nerd.
At least he's on your side.
Cool.
Exactly.
We're not adjourned yet, are we?
No.
No.
Just in case
I
you
called
wanted to
John
see.
Michael a nerd on the record.
All right, is there any other business? Everybody good? All hearts and minds clear?
I moved to adjourn.
You move to adjourn?
Bye.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thanks for that always good reminder, like, we're not adjourned, the camera and light is still on.